Barbell rows is probably one of the best ways to train the upper back. I think there's been lots of people discussing this online, pull-ups versus rows and whatever, but I think I've come to a conclusion finally, after many years being on the other side. I've come to the conclusion that barbell rows are superior than pull-ups. In terms of overall back development, I think you get more out of it. You get traps, you get lats, you also get erectors as well involved. So it's a wholesome upper back, or just the whole back developer. The only negative when it comes to rows is that it impedes on recovery when you're thinking about doing squats and deadlifts. So this is where I think a lot of people exclude rows, because when you put it into the same mix, with squats and deadlifts, rows do come up third in that mix. And so if you're going to do a lift as an accessory that's costing you lots and lots of points, and taking away those points away from squats and deadlifts, I understand why people, leave rows and plug in pull-ups, just simply because pull-ups are easier to recover and you still get the lats and some traps, if you could argue, depends how you do them, I guess. So rows are, one of the best ways to go about it. But what's another way to train the upper back in this sense that we really want to train it? I keep talking about how it translates to the squat, bench, deadlift. There's arguments there that barbell rows will improve all three lifts. But when it comes to that thoracic upper back extension that we need for bench press, for deadlift, for squats, there's also another thing that you can do, and that is overhead squatting. If you haven't tried overhead squatting, I understand you. It's one of those things that is very, very difficult. And if you don't train it, I assume that you'll never be able to do it. And if you've done it in the past and you don't, if you stop, and you're probably going to, lose the ability to do it. Now, overhead squatting to depth, like ATG stuff, is very, very advanced. It's not just about thoracic extension, shoulder mobility, stability. It's also about your ankles, your knees, your hips. So it's a whole body mobility screening tool in a way. If you see somebody, squatting, overhead squatting, let's just add bare feet, flat shoe, overhead squatting. That's elite level mobility. A lot of people can't do that. And I've seen people, prop themselves up on heels or plates or whatever. Yeah, sure, that makes it a little bit easier. But I think you're bypassing the whole point of the exercise. But anyway, regardless of that, if you're in Olympic weightlifting, you need the heels in order to, do well in your sport. Very, very few people can really do Olympic weightlifting without freaking heels. You need to be a gifted leverage kind of human being to be able to do that. But overhead squatting is incredibly tough for the upper back. It's kind of like front squats. Every degree that you lean forward costs you like tenfold in the upper back. So if you don't have the ability, for lower body reasons, you start to lean forward, you're copping it big time, and soon you're going to drop the bar forward. So it's kind of like this, seesaw battle between the upper and lower body. It's like constant communication. Okay, I really need some leg drive. I really need my glutes involved. I really need my posterior chain involved. But you need to kind of like, be easy on the accelerator when it comes to that, because if you slam the accelerator and chuck in the posterior chain power, all of a sudden you're spinning tires, which means in this sense you're dropping the bar forward. So it's a really, really interesting way to squat, because you need to go slow and you need to continually look for stability in the barbell. The barbell in this lift is even less forgiving than the front squat. The front squat, you can kind of like fight it a little bit more. When the bar is overhead like that, there is very little support. And because of the length of your arm is such, fully extended, the lower traps, the rhomboids, man, like if you want to, have a mind-muscle connection with those muscles, overhead work and going into a squat is different. You could probably argue that overhead pressing, push pressing will also do it to some degree, but I think it's that hip flexion, that squatting motion that really engages those mid-back, upper back, thoracic extensors, shoulder girdle stabilizers. They're really, really engaged, because for every degree you lean, you hear about it from those muscle groups. So I tried it today, purely going down the thought process of upper back training. I did rows yesterday, really, really nice, getting after it. I don't want to do any more rows until tomorrow, so I'm kind of doing it every other day. But I thought, is there another way I can hit it from another plane? This is an isometric type of contraction, and it really gets your hip flexors involved. It's a whole mobility strengthening tool. Obviously, I'm doing it with no heels, which makes it freaking difficult. And if you think about my weaknesses as a lifter, I think about this all the time. Some of the things that I struggle with is, keeping upright, keeping really, really upright for whatever reason, no heels, really narrow stance, all that stuff. But this is another reason, this is another tool, this is another screen that it goes in the favor of this argument that I have a weak upper back. I cannot do the overhead squat, and I can't, whatever the muscles involved, I can't keep upright. So my barbell row is weak, my overhead positioning is really weak. So it's kind of like these things are matching now. There's a pattern forming. If you think about Olympic weightlifters, they spend a great deal of their training the overhead position, whether it's clean and jerk, the jerking portion, or whether it's snatching. Everything's finishing overhead. So their ability to stabilize implements over their head, or barbells overhead, weights, is very, very strong. And you can see that in their squatting ability. And this is the thing where you kind of like look for patterns in different sports. The Olympic weightlifting squat is very, very upright. Very, very upright. Obviously, it's not just because they train overhead, but it's probably strengthened. Their ability to squat so upright is strengthened by their ability to press overhead, to stabilize weights overhead. So it's interesting. It's interesting. And this whole thing stemmed from that article by Greg Knuckles. I'm mentioning it again. This idea that your upper back is the first domino. If that thing collapses, you're going to start to fail down the posterior chain. You're going to blame the lower back. You're going to blame the glutes for doing a good morning squat. But really, what started the whole trend, the start of the whole domino effect, was the fact that you were unable to stabilize the upper back. And so training the overhead squat, man, that is like probably the best way, the most specific, probably the best carryover of any exercise to do an overhead squat that really engages those rhomboids, lower traps, mid traps, whatever you want to call it, whatever the erectors, the upper erectors, all of those muscles are fully engaged exactly how you would want them when the bar is on your back in a high bar and you're squatting top weights. If you don't collapse the upper back, you are going to be in a better leveraged position to use your quads and to delay the failing of your quads. And then you can, ask questions of your posterior chain later on. But this is kind of how it goes, man. And to me, it makes sense. It makes sense. The upper back is involved. And this is something that I've been very, very guilty of. For years, man, I wanted that minimalistic approach. All I wanted to do is squat. That is it. Can I just squat, varying, the progressions, varying the difficulty, the volumes, undulating that kind of business as time goes on, and just have volume intensity as the thing I change. Frequency is fixed every single day, and I just go on and I keep on, getting gains like that way. It's becoming more apparent to me that the upper body has a lot to do with the squat, especially the high bar. The higher the bar travels up the back, the higher your racking position, the more the upper back is involved. So if you're a low bar squatter, it probably has less business in that motion. But if you are a high bar squatter, if you are doing an overhead squat, it has everything to do with the overhead squat. And so there's like this spectrum of involvement from the low bar all the way to the overhead. The higher we get, the more upper back business, strength, stability you need. After all these years of doing the squat every day, this is a lesson that I've learned now. Call me ignorant, call me silly, call me all these different things, but I tested it, I kept digging, I kept learning, and now I'm kind of to a point where, okay, I have full justification now to get after my upper back. Full justification, full reasoning. You cannot be bowing, you cannot be fish rodding, effect, at the end of that lever, which is our spine. You cannot be squatting like that. The moment your upper back gives out, like Greg Knuckles said in that article, it's over, man. That's the difference between squatting and deadlifting. In a deadlift, you can't finish the lift with a completely rounded over upper back. with squats, you cannot. You cannot do it, and it is the way it is. So that's the thinking that I have right now. And in this kind of week, maybe 2 week period where I'm kind of taking it easy on the squatting portion, I will kind of try to explore some of this upper back business. I already feel thicker traps. I already feel the lats are, you know, there's a connection day to day now. They're feeling pumped, obviously, as they should be after all these rows. Let's see, once this fatigue, the squatting fatigue wears off, if I can translate some of these thoughts into actual reality and see some more weights on the bar. Appreciate all of you guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.